Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm Flora speaking out. And today is a very interesting day. It's the 6th of December, which is actually the birthday of St. Nicholas himself, the real St. Nicholas. In Germany and the Netherlands, they celebrate this day by having children put their shoes out near the door or near the stove, mostly no chimneys there, and the hopes that the spirit of St. Nicholas will come in the night and leave fruit, nuts, candy, and cookies in those shoes. And of course, it's very important that the night before you polish your shoes to a bright shine, or St. Nicholas might not approve. My husband, who was born and raised in Germany, brought that custom back to our family after we were married, and our children had a lot of fun finding the nuts, fruits, cookies in their shoes the next morning. I don't recall they were all that meticulous about polishing and shining the shoes. I could be remembering wrong. Yeah, well, I recently looked up the real St. Nicholas. It's such fun in the 90s to learn things, look them up that you never did before. He was a bishop of the late third century, early fourth century. He was bishop in an area that's now Turkey. At the time, it was a Greek area. He was a doughty, warrior-like spirit. I was astonished at the number of legends about him. And you know, legends, though they may be mythical, tell a lot about the basic personality around which those legends form. For a while, he was imprisoned, and they say tortured for his faith, under the Roman Emperor Diocletian. When he got out with his life, when Rome began to tend towards tolerating Christianity, he remained a doughty moral warrior. He was famous, at least the legends go, for saving girls who were going to be sold into prostitution, for saving little children from predatory kidnappers. He went to bat for innocent men who were about to be executed and saw to it they were exonerated and released. You might say not much resemblance to our fat, bewhiskered, red-suited Santa Claus in this country. Although, I don't know, maybe our Santa Claus, you know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to tame a reindeer, much less to drive, how many was it, 8, through a frosty night in the sky, and then come down through a chimney, getting your clothes all dirty. A certain amount of courage is shown in our American Santa Claus. About the ho, 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 I don't know if the original St. Nicholas, whose relics are in Bari, Italy now, I don't know if he was much in for hearty, jolly laughter, but what do I know? Maybe he was. Many of the great leaders of this world have warm laughter along with their battle for goodness. All right, that's the celebration today. Tomorrow is a memorial of another kind. December 7th, as Roosevelt called it, a day that shall live in infamy. It was on a Sunday, like tomorrow would be, December 7th. I still remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when the news broke through for us that Sunday. Thousands young men killed, sneak attack, drowning under the ships, burning to death in the oil and the water. I knew one of them. He had been a graduate of my high school. That week, the world turned upside down for us. Also, that very week began the cruel and constitutional act of our own government of rounding up at least 120,000 Japanese American citizens, many of whose sons had been killed in that attack. I rounded them up and incarcerated them for 5 terrible years. Not murdered or gassed them, but put them to cold, lonely, drafty places out in deserts and mountains with only a few hours or the most 3 days warning. I didn't know till I looked it up that there were actually quite a lot of government figures, politicians who protested this. Most of us weren't even thinking about it. The world had turned upside down. We were in total war. I don't remember that Christmas, oddly enough. I remember many of my Christmases. That first one with us at war, I have no memories of it whatever. But knowing my parents, they did all they could to make it a time of laughter and joy as well as a time of disaster. And today, of course, this very week, we're living with the disastrous thing that this vilest of administrations that our nation's ever had is responsible for. You already know all about it. The second strike, the survivors of that torpedoed boat going up in flames, clinging to the boat, the second strike. And the coward Hegseth says, oh, I wasn't paying attention. I didn't know there were survivors. I remember with President Truman, he had a sign on his desk saying, the buck stops here, meaning that the first in the chain of command is responsible for what happens under his name and in his command. And Hegseth had said, kill them all. Well, you know about that. I needn't belabor it. The outrage we felt, and this was clean, clear, valid, valuable anger. But we're in this vile administration for some years to come, a long haul. How are we going to keep it clean and decent, the anger? How to keep it from becoming bitterness, vengeful rage, exhausted resentment, that kind of dirty anger that tears up one's health or relationships, poisons the atmosphere. How to keep it clean, as they say. First of all, know it, name it, state it out loud, let it lead to action, public witness. Act, respond, and show it as the original real St. Nicholas did back in those disastrous days of persecution and evil. Well, where does laughter come in? Anger and laughter. Clean anger makes room for clean laughter. Not the bitter, sneering laughter, not the laughter that trivializes, not the laughter that hides, denies, brushes off. A different kind of laughter goes with anger. A warm-hearted, high-hearted, all-embracing fellowship of laughter. The laughter of fellowship when facing great challenges. The greatest generals have known this, the greatest saints, the greatest leaders. This warm laughter of fellowship. You yourself have known it as you've banded together to resist this vile administration. It's the laughter of deepest triumph, which says, together we are as strong as the sunlight, no matter how long it takes. The laughter of the undefeated, courageous spirit. Today is another very special day for my family. It's the day of the memorial of a beloved nephew of mine who has just died after years of total debilitating, exhausting illness. He was a musician, a composer as well as performer. He was a lover of God. He was a lover of laughter, of the deepest, most joyous kind. And the last time I spoke to him on the telephone, when he could still speak, that spirit of brave laughter was still in his voice as he groped for words. As I think of him, and I think of each of you in your own way of fiery light and courage in your lives, in your witness, in your fellowship, your marching, your action in these disastrous days of our government. I've got a poem I want to read to you. I remembered it, strangely enough, maybe not so strangely, a year ago, November, that disastrous morning, the day after Election Day, when millions of us woke up realizing we'd put a man of dishonor back into the presidency, even after having had 4 years of it. It was a disastrous morning in many of our hearts. And oddly enough, I remembered this poem that very morning. And a loved one of mine looked up the words. I couldn't remember all of them. And I think I have read these words almost every day of this year following the election. I give it to you now in honor of my beloved nephew and his gallant, joyful, laughing, compassionate spirit, and in honor of each one of you. I'll read it slowly. It is written by 120 years ago, written by a man named William Vaughn Moody, dedicated to a friend of his who, like my nephew, carried the high-heartedness to the very end. It doesn't seem to have a title, but here it is. Of wounds and sore defeat, I made my battle stay. Winged sandals for my feet I wove of my delay. Of weariness and fear, I made my shouting spear. Of loss and doubt and dread and swift oncoming doom, I made a helmet for my head and a floating plume. From the shutting mists of death, from the failure of the breath, I made a battle horn to blow across the veils of overthrow. Oh, hearken, love, that battle horn, the triumph clear, the silver scorn. Oh, listen where the echoes bring down the gray, disastrous morn, laughter and rallying. Down the gray, disastrous morn, laughter and rallying. Thank you for sharing with me. See you next week.